I've got the fan RC gearbox here. So we're not going to use the casing for this build because that's sort of a replica of the re-release case, at least, of the Stealth gearbox. In 1989, Associated Hands machined what became the Stealth, but at the time it was hand machine prototype casings from nylon. So I've recreated those. So let's grab out bag 4. So it's got a few of the gearbox parts in it. So I'll pop them out. So I've done, because Associated and Fan RC did the re-release Stealth box, when they did it, the idler assembly, or the idler gear, sort of shaft bearing assembly, was different to the original Stealth, which means that there needs to be two different versions. So the original Stealth had the bearing into the case, so all the bearings for the diff, top lay shaft and the idler went into the case, whereas the Associated re-release and the Fan RC replica, the bearings, as per the modern idlers in all the modern Associated buggies, had the bearings in the idler itself, and the shaft goes through the bearings and into the casing. So I'll grab this second one here. So probably won't be able to see it, but we've got two slightly different variations of the casing. Let's see if we can get a bit of light onto that. So this casing here, the bottom of the screen, has a cutout for the bearing in the middle for the idler, and this casing here has the just a small hole for the shaft. So for this build, because I'm using the Fan RC gearbox, which has the idler gear where the bearings go into it, I'll be using the re-release style casing. So I'll set the other one, the OG casing, aside, and we'll proceed with this. Put these aside. So you can see here the small idler has the big opening for the bearings. Make a little bit of room here. we don't lose a small bearing, small diff balls. That was super elegantly done. Okay, so for those of you who have built RC10 stealth gearboxes, this will be nothing new. So standard build. Well, actually, I lie. Not quite a standard build because we'll be using the Replica 89 casing. Other than that, it's pretty much standard. So, got all our pieces there, not throwing anything else. Awesome. Yeah, so you can see here, I think unfortunately the lay shaft and the large slipper spring and washers, etc., have been, or the slipper plates, slipper ring, even the diff gears, all modelled on the Associated's re-release. So they re-released the Kinwald 93 buggy, I think it was 2014 maybe, quite a while ago now. That was sort of before the vintage wave resurgence had really started in earnest, and they re-released that buggy, and it wasn't that popular at the time, unfortunately. So that's when Associated thought, oh, there's nothing in the vintage scene, and gave up on it until recently. But yeah, that re-release buggy had a different, probably more modern pieces for the slipper. So yeah, it's a bit big. It sticks out a lot more than the original Stealth. Doesn't fit inside the original gear cover either, which is annoying. But yeah, other than that, it's all pretty cool. So same thing with the gear casing. Printed it with a brim so it stays nice and square and flat on the print bed, and it needs trimming. most of the brim trimmed off. Clean it up. Not sure if you can see of my shoulder here, we've got the printer going, printing some more of these gearbox casings. Need to be building 4 of these cars in total, so this is the second one. Well, actually this is the third one. The second one is almost complete, so there's J. Halsey. We've got the let car that's almost complete over on the shelf somewhere. And then there's only one more after that to do, which is the Rick Velo had a car, had the 4th prototype that made the A final, and then the 5th associated car was Craig Drescher actually, but he didn't have a prototype car, so he had a prototype gearbox from the team, but he got into the A. I think it was qualified 6th and finished 5th, I think is correct. And yeah, so he did awesome. Shows that there was probably marginal gains in the stealth car. In the right hands, it showed that pretty much a standard car with the stealth gearbox could perform equally. And of course, he had the Yokomo wheels and tires provided to him as well. So yeah, we've got one of our bash committee. Got one of our bash committee, Aaron Defina, who's got the associated graphite, RC10 graphite, which we're going to dress up as Drescher's car. And the paint scheme of that one's probably the most complex of them all. Masami ones we've already got done, but the Drescher car had a very complex scheme, like an eagle and all sorts of other patterns. So we've got TFG, who's been volunteered to paint that up for us, and Rory Cull didn't quite make the A in the 89 Worlds, but he had a similar associated, I think it was a graphite, might have been his signature purple tub car. Yeah, he didn't quite make the A, but he had an identical paint scheme from Drescher, so they're both painted in the same scheme, and the only difference was the name. So down one side it said Craig and Rory on the 2 shells. So yeah, we'll see what the painting guru TFG can do with that. I'm sure it'll be spectacular. So yeah, the other schemes are thankfully a lot simpler. I might try and attempt to do a couple of them, like the Halsey and the Let cars. Even the Rick Velo car, not a lot of good pictures of that around, which is good and bad. So it means we can't really be wrong, but we don't know exactly what it looks like. So it's like what was it? Sort of a dark color, maybe a black, maybe a dark blue, maybe a bit purple. Not sure. And reasonably simple patterns. So that's an easy one to do, and it may or may not be accurate. Yeah, so in total we had the 5 associated cars, 4 stealth prototypes like this, and 1 standard graphite, or semi-standard graphite. And then we had 3 of the Losi JRX2s, or variation of the production model that was available at the time. And of course Mike Dunn and his brother Steve Dunn doing the mechanics for him, who qualified second on the front row. His performance was pretty incredible. So yeah, had the 3 Losis. Was it Ron Rossetti? I've gone blank on the other name. Wow. I'll put that up on the screen. We had, what else was it? So that's 8 cars. There's only 2 others. There was Jamie Booth's Top Cat. So even Jamie himself said that car was not a very good handling car at the time relative to the others. His result of popping into the A final of the World seems to talk otherwise, but combination of his skill and the car, I guess, was pretty awesome. And we've got Bormac, Jason Millward, long time vintage lover. Way before the bash started, he was well into the vintage cars and the love of the history of them. I think way back, probably going to be wrong, but say 2009, all through the mid-teens, 2000s. He was running vintage and evolving his true vintage RC channel, which is super cool. So yeah, so Jason has agreed to give his time and expertise to help us in building up a Top Cat. The Jamie Booth car paint scheme is pretty, I think pretty straightforward. Sort of a pink colour with some, was it lighter silver maybe, or off like a white or a lighter pink sort of crisscross pattern. Yeah, and then the final car. Jack Johnson was the other Losi, of course. Yeah, and the other car was the Soul Ultima Pro. So that was another quite a prototype car from Joel Johnson. So both Joel and Jack Johnson were in the A final as brothers together. Don't know if that's been done since. Somebody can tell me if that has, but I'm not aware of another time when 2 brothers have been in an A final of a Worlds, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so he had Joel Johnson was running the Ultima Pro at the time. So it was a quite customized car, double deck chassis. I think it was a longer wheelbase. Had an Optima mid maybe, or one of the Optima bodies on it. It looked pretty cool. So I've got Carter Sims building that for us, which is super cool, and doing the body. So from the House of Berserk. So yeah, so they're the 10 cars. Epic process to get them all sort of created and built or designed and built where needed, and get all the bodies painted up so that they look correct, because that'll really finish off the effect, of course, of the A final grid, all 10 cars. The chassis will be pretty close and as replicas we can get them, but the bodies obviously is what you see most of the time and when they're on the track. So that'll really create the epic spectacle that we're hoping for. Cool, so that's cleaned up. So quite important with the gearbox halves, especially when they're printed, is to sand flat the mating surfaces and also the bottom surface where it's going to mate to the chassis, of course. So I'll just do a bit of extra sanding here on a nice flat surface. So that makes sure that the sort of halves, you know, mate up properly. It all sits square. There's no gaps, so keeps the dust out. Cool. I'll put them together and do the bottom surface. If you want to be super pedantic here, we could even thread a couple of bolts through to make sure it's all square. And at this point, I will grab my, did I say it was? So 7/16 drill, I think, about 2.75 mil. So here we want to very carefully drill out a few of these holes just to make the assembly a bit easier for these large, got these long 1-inch 440 bolts, these puppies. We're actually only going to use 3 of them for this build because the 4th hole is kind of obscured. So the way that Masaki or Associated Masaki built these cars is they had the 2 rear camber links were in a sort of custom made hole a long way inboard, so it lengthened the link, moved the inner pivot position inboard quite a bit, and that actually is very close, and the ball link is is obscured by the edge of the motor plate actually. So a bit of dremeling is required on the motor plate to chop a little wedge out, which replicates the original car, and then that clears the ball cup. And as a result of that, you can't use the 4th hole. It's normally in that position in the motor plate. So we're only going to use 3 of them, but anyway, all good. So there's one bolt here. So where we're not going to use, so you got the motor at the back of the gearbox there. This front sort of middle one. We're not going to screw that into the motor plate, but we're just going to put a shorter screw in there, like a 3/8 440. So that's going to thread into the half of the gearbox that's on the right hand side that faces the motor plate. So we don't want to drill out that hole. So always like super careful there and sort of double check it, because if you drill it out then the thread's gone. Not the end of the world, but it's annoying. So the other ones, I'm just going to run this drill through it. It should go through super easy. The holes are very, very close to the right size. And on this side, like the left hand side of the gearbox, we can drill them all out because we just want the bolts to slide through. Cool. So we can just do a quick test. So they don't quite slide through, but I'll leave them like that. Probably better to be slightly threaded rather than loose. So I'll just pop those in there. So that kind of squares up the gearbox. Give it a bit more of a sand there. So this just makes sure it's a nice square flat surface that will seat and seal to the chassis nicely. Okay. Awesome. Cool, so last little bit that we'll do to prep the gearbox halves is just to check the bearing fitment, and the shaft fitment, I guess. So they should, yep, just beautiful slide in. So I should have sized these so that there's no play obviously, and there's no sort of dremeling required. So yeah, they all just slide in with an interference fit. So just a low amount of force pushes them in, and there's no play at the same time. Cool. I think I can pop all of these in. Let's have a look at the manual as well while we're about it. So have I missed any key things? So remove the brim, shim the top lay shaft on the left side. Yep, so I've made the seating of these top lay shaft bearings sort of a little bit deeper, I guess you could say. So there's a bit of a play in the top lay shaft. So this was deliberate so that when you position the lay shaft in the top of the gearbox, it's sort of by default it sets the inner slipper plate very close to the motor plate, and with this, if there's a little bit of sort of play or wear, and if your motor plate bolts stick out a little bit too much, even just a few tenths of a millimeter, they can interfere and like scratch the back of the slipper plate, which of course is bad juju. We don't want that. So what I've done is, by seating the bearings a little bit wider in the casing, both sides, it's just a mirror image of each other, it allows you to shim the lay shaft basically further to the right, so it sticks out further, gives you a little bit more clearance from the inner slipper to the motor plate, and then it all sits nicely. So that way you can put some shims on the outside of the, like on the left hand side of the top lay shaft, and it moves the lay shaft to the right. And then we've got these little rings as well, you might have noticed. The way I printed these casings is flat onto the print bed, so to get the flat surface doesn't really allow for the bulge in what the original ones had around the bearing. So what I've got is a little groove that you might need to just clean up a fraction, and this ring, I'll just pop these bearings back out for now. So these little rings have a ridge, and hopefully they will go in. But okay, so yeah, I need to be widened out a little bit, that groove. You just have to keep widening it until that ring, the ridge of the ring, will push in and seat in. There we go, that looks good. Yeah, press fit usually holds it, but you can put a couple of drops of super glue on it if you want to stop it coming out, because it never needs to come out. And as I said, it's just cosmetic on the outside, so give it that little raised proud lip. Cool, okay, so that's finally done. And that's it for the prep of the gearbox halves. So the custom replica to replicate the old handmade nylon case that they used in '89. So yeah, so after '89 they finished evolving and designing the stealth gearbox, which was a bit of a game changer in the buggy world at that time. And then it came out, it was released in the next production kit as what we know as the original stealth, which was a lot more refined, productionized case shape compared to the sort of square blocky prototype looking version, which I think is super cool because it's it looks like prototype, it looks like handmade, which it was. So yeah, that's it. Okay, now let's build a diff. Where should we start? Or gearbox, we probably should start with the diff, I reckon. So pop those bearings back in there, and let's get stuck into the diff. So I might grab a bit of toweling for this. Diff halves. Let's get rid of all the release agent, or not release agent, the oils off the metal parts. They do feel kind of greasy, so preservation oil for the packaging. Probably same for the diff rings. You can sand the diff rings, I usually do. I tend not to use too fine a sandpaper, because the idea of the diff balls and the diff rings is not for them to be slipping against each other. The exact opposite's required. You need the grip of the ball onto the ring. So what I like to use is usually about probably a 600 grit. How do I say it? Anyway, it says 600. 600 grit sandpaper. And you'll see that the rings have usually, and these ones do, usually have a slightly curved sort of edge on one side and a more sharper edge on the other side. So I want the curved edge to face towards the balls. So we'll sand that side down. So I think the idea of the sanding in my mind is just to get rid of any low or high spots on the diff rings, especially when they're brand new. They might not be perfectly flat, so giving them a sand with a slightly more abrasive sandpaper like 600 will take off those high and low spots. High spots quicker. The low spots might take a little while if they're bad, because you've got to kind of remove all the rest of the material off the surface. And once you do that, it gives you a nice sort of etched, crosshatch kind of a pattern, which tends to grip on the diff balls a lot better, I find. So you don't have to crank it quite as tight, like the diff doesn't have to be quite as tight to stop it slipping. Yeah, so that way you can get a super smooth diff that doesn't have to be over tightened, and everything works correctly, and it resists slipping as well, because as soon as the plates and the balls are slipping against each other, it wears them out a lot faster, overheats the whole thing, and kind of can kill the diff pretty quickly if you keep running it in that condition or that sort of state, which is very bad. Let's have a quick look at this. Yeah, these you can see there's quite a few high and low spots still, so they're pretty pretty not flat. Oh, another trick I use here is you can just grab the out drive that hasn't got the protrusion for the bearing, and use that as a little holder. And also wet and dry, you can use water or a bit of motor spray on the wet and dry sandpaper. So yeah, if you use the out drive like that, the center of it's usually less proud than the surface of the ring, so it doesn't hit the sandpaper, so you don't sand back your actual diff hub. But this way it gives you something to hold, and also keeps the ring nice and sort of flat, of course, which is much better than just doing it by your fingers. Slight circular motion seems to always be the nicest. Gives the most consistent, balanced sanding of an item. Let's have a look at that. It's looking pretty good. Not quite there, but looking good. We can add a little bit of water to the wet and dry. The water will stay there compared to the motor spray that just evaporates. So if it's just a quick thing, the motor spray works nicely, but if you want to do a bit more sanding for a bit longer, the water is a much better option. Oh, it's looking pretty good. Okay, how's it coming along? Getting there? Yep, these ones need a lot of sanding by the look of it. So definitely trying to get the surface flat, not mirror polished, just flat and give a good texture to grip the ball, so it doesn't slip. But yeah, the flatter it is, I guess the more consistent and smooth the diff is going to be, always. Almost there. You still see at least one low spot. Okay, pretty close. It's tempting to keep going forever on these, but that looks pretty good. Okay, so I've got the small, was it 2mm? I think these are actually 2mm, not Imperial. Yeah, 2mm bolt, which then has a 2mm hex driver. And these diffs come with a thrust race, contained thrust race, so you don't have to have the separate little thrust balls like the originals did. Okay, we need some grease, is the word. So what do we need? Black grease. Got some Outsiders, massive tub of black grease there. And we need some diff grease as well. So I've got some rather messy diff grease here. So this is the associated stuff. Is that the right one? Yeah, this is the associated. Let's clean that up a bit. So it's the normal, what's called stealth diff lube, and I've just decanted it into a little syringe to make the application process to my liking. Cool. So let's pop that out of the way. These washers used to be different to each other in the original diffs. I think they still are. Looks like it's a bigger, one of them usually have a bigger inner diameter. What's that? It's about 2.5. It's about 2.35. Yeah, so that one's smaller. So I got the larger one on first, so it goes over the shoulder of the bolts, and then let's put some black grease into the thrust. Pack it in, and then we'll pop it on second washer. I'll obviously make sure the grooves and the washers are facing the thrust. So that's ready. So the bolt goes into the out drive without the protrusion. Don't know if that totally matters, but I always remember that's the way they did them. And then the spring and the retaining nut, diff retaining nut, will go into the other side. I always put Loctite on this retaining nut. I know it's probably not necessary because it has a plastic part to it as well, but I like the added benefit of a little bit of Loctite on the metal nut insert part to stop it from loosening or changing during running. Cool, now we've got spur gear, all of the diff balls. Hopefully I haven't lost any of these. What have we got? 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, for these ones, for like on-road diffs, I usually just coat the actual diff balls and then pop them into the spur, but for these associated type stealth ones, or any associated diff I guess, because they haven't really changed much to the modern ones, same principle. So with these, for some reason, I know everyone's different, but I like to put the diff grease directly into the hole. I be quite generous. always tempting to grab these with tweezers or push them in with a hex driver or something, with a tool. Don't know if it really matters, but I try not to, just in case it scratches or damages the ball surface. Like a little cotton bud or a bit of plastic or something is always preferable. Yep, so squish them all in there, get a good amount of grease inside the hole and around the ball, and then can wipe off the excess. I think it tend to fly out anyway after a first run, whatever excess there is, but make sure there's enough in there for starters. Cool. Make sure I put the sanded side up. I don't know about these diffs. Sometimes I like to put a really thick sticky grease behind the ring just to stop it slipping, because I think if the ring slips it's sort of inconsistent and not ideal because it's slipping. So I usually don't know if it matters too much what it is, but got some of this old Tamiya, was it VG, the red one, which is nice and tacky. So just grab a little bit of that. Doesn't need much, because you don't want too much, because it'll fill the gap between the diff out drive and the ring too much. And might not seat properly, so just put a small amount there. Turn the ring around a bit, make sure it sort of squishes out the excess and seats nicely. We can work that in when we gradually tighten the diff later anyway. Cool, a little bit on the other one. You can see on these diffs just the outer rim of the out drive here is raised slightly, so that's where the plate's going to seat anyway. That should do. Nice. Cool, so get the bearings. So remember that that's the side without the protrusion that we're going to put the bolt into first. All the bolting from that side. Actually, I'll just make sure the bearing is heated in there nicely. Cool. Let's pop this pre-prepared thrust with the bolt in there, and then the spring. The original springs, they used to say to clamp them with the pliers first. I'm not sure if you still need to do that with these ones from Fan, but yeah, they always said give it a sort of compression to seat the material. I think after we usually run it for a run or two, you should recheck a new diff build, sort of recheck the tightness anyway. Cool, so that's just no play, but I can slip the spur super easy at the moment. So just make sure everything's lined up. It's nice and straight and turning properly. You can feel it's pretty thick with all the grease we put in there, so as I said, that'll get flung out. First run or so, it'll fling out a bit of grease into inside of the gearbox. But that's why it's always good to check after the first run. Reset the diff, because it could have seated a bit. The rings will seat a bit, the spring will seat in a bit, and it can loosen up. And the worst thing to do is to keep running it when the diff is loose. Of course, that'll destroy it pretty quickly. So that feels okay. So now we can tighten it. I usually go sort of part way, just sort of keep turning it a bit, make sure it's all seating properly. But the original instructions of these stealth diffs was that you would screw the screw in until it bottoms out. You can feel it just as it bottoms in the threads. And the head, everything will be compressed fully. And make sure you don't keep cranking it, because it'll break something. And then the trick was not the trick, just the instructions was to back out the screw, so loosen the screw. I think it was between 1/8 and 1/4 of a turn. I usually kind of just go 1/8 roughly. You want to keep it on the tightish side, especially with if you're running with brushless motors these days. They have a lot more torque than what the old brushed motors used to have. So it's always good to keep it slightly tight, I reckon. And you can tell on these stealth diffs when the little ears on the retaining nut sort of get close to bottoming out in the outdrive slot. It's pretty much when it's going to be tightening up. So I'll keep going in. So there we go. So it's bottomed out now. So now you can get a reference point and just turn it about 1/8 of a turn. And just work it a little bit. Oh, feels good. I like it. I like it. Beautiful. Sometimes I like to just do that again, so just sort of retighten it till it bottoms. Yep. And then just back it off 1/8. Cool, that's about it. So that's the diff done. Okay, let's tidy up a little bit. Pop that out of the way. I can go over there. Okay. I might shim this, so I'm going to go find some shims. Okay, I'm back. That was difficult. So I hunted everywhere for, I think they're like 3/8 of an inch shims, which are not that easy to get. I did have a little batch a while ago, but I definitely couldn't find them, so I kind of cheated. So there's two ways to cheat. One is got some 5mm shims, so 5mm in the diameter is a little bit too big. I have used them in the past. I think it works fine, won't make any difference if they're not a perfect fit. I also cheated by just making my own, so just made some little printed ones, which I've also used in the past. It seems to work perfectly fine. So yeah, so we'll try this. I've got a, what is this, 1mm or something? Yep, that's 1 mil thick. I've also got some thinner, like 0.2, 0.3. That's about 0.3 mil shim, 5 mil shim. So I'll try this 1 mil. See if that's okay, if it doesn't make it too tight. So I'll put them there just in case we need to swap it out. So let's test this. So no shims on the shaft, and we'll just push that through, so that way the shaft sticks out as much as possible and clears the motor plate, as I was saying. And we've got the shim on this end, on the short end, and that is going to be way too thick. So it doesn't even let the gearbox hubs close. So I will pop that one off. So much for that idea. And let's just try it without any shims. See what sort of end play we've got. Yeah, so I've got a bit there. It's not end of the world, but I'd like to get rid of a bit of that. So let's pop on 2 lots of 0.3. So that's 0.6 in there. That's no play already. So maybe just 1. Oops. 1. And also keep in mind that when we actually bolt it up for real, it's going to squash it a bit more than my hand pressure does. So there's a little bit of play there. That feels good. It'll probably reduce a fraction when we tighten it. So that is good. So yes, I've got 1 0.3 mil shim. It's a 5 mil in the diameter, which is a fraction loose on the shaft, but that is not going to make any difference. Cool. So that's that bit. Next, I'll just pop that shim off so I don't lose it. Next is the center shaft. So that goes in there. And the diff. So the original instructions always said to put the side with the hex bolt, so you can adjust it on the right hand side. Again, I don't know if it matters, but that was the original instructions. Okay, so make sure all the bearings are seated, and then we'll pop that shim back, and pop the other side of the gearbox on. Cool, seems to turn. So if you did have any, if it didn't turn easily, if it was binding or rubbing on something, you just need to sort of suss out where it's rubbing. You might need to sand a bit more on the inner edges, which I might do just for fun. So notice there's just pop those bearings out. Just take off the corners. Don't think it makes any difference, but makes me feel good. Take off those slight sharp corners from the print. Also, if there's any errant material, of course, when you sand it, sort of gets rid of any little wisps or corners that might get in the way of the gears. They'll probably wear off pretty quick anyway if something's rubbing once you run it. But we want to make it as smooth and as free as possible, of course. Another thing to check is that these large bearings are seating nicely. Make sure there's no debris or any material in there. That's good. One thing you do is just pop the diff in temporarily, just by itself, and make sure that it's free. It's got a fraction of end play, not much there, so that's pretty good. Just a little bit. Yep, it's like turning. Maybe a fraction at the bottom there that's rubbing. You can slice the edges with a scalpel as well if you want, a bit quicker. Nice. Beautiful. Cool. So got shim, got the hex on the right hand side. Got the idler gear, might help. Oh, nice. Okay. So we need one little extra 3/8 440 socket. We'll pop that one in first. So that goes in that front or the middle hole that we don't want to go through to the motor plate. So don't need to really over tighten any of these. Probably just as the gap closes up between the two halves. Cool, it's pretty good. So what's next? We'll slide/thread the 3 long 1-inch bolts. I think there's 1 inch. They come with the fan kit anyway. But if you're, yep, that'll be 1 inch. Yeah, but if you need to get them separately, they're the standard 1 inch from the original Associated Stealth. Don't quite push through, but I'll leave them like that. So I need to thread them, which takes a bit longer, but gives it a nice fit. So stick it out the other side a little bit. Cool. So next is the motor plate. So you'll see here we've got these two screws here for the cover, motor bolts of course. Then we've got these 4 holes. So you've got 1, 2, 3 and 4. So this 4th hole we're not going to use, and we're going to chop off that corner of the plate. I'm not going to hurt your ears with the Dremel, so I'll show you where it's going to be cut. Just basically off that corner. So that's the corner there that we're going to chop off. go attack it with the Dremel, and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. Spared you the noise of the Dremel, so always make sure you're using eye protection when doing that sort of stuff. So tidy this up. So Dremel out of the way. Cool, okay, so taking that corner off, just down there, and also, just for the sake of it, to make it super replica, just near the bottom gear cover bolt, just took probably not even half a mil off that surface just to clear the arm, because that's what was on the original. So smooth that up. Okay, clean that up nicely. Cool. Now we can continue. So from the kit we've got these three little replica standoffs. You can use originals, they're exactly the same. So they go over those three motor bolts, and I have my funky little pseudo dust cover. So this used to be a, I don't know what the material was, it's like a sort of carpet underlay or some sort of compressed matted, not foam, but insulation type material in the original kits, which would kind of deteriorate and disintegrate pretty fast as well. So sort of, that's why I call it pseudo, because it's not an exact replica, but it does the job. So that sits there in between those three standoffs and bolts. And you'll see this new lay shaft, or this fan RC lay shaft, is a replica of the newer re-release version, so it doesn't have a pin. The original Stealth used to have a little split pin that was quite difficult to push into the hole in the lay shaft, and also made it a bit of a pain if you wanted to take it apart and get to the bearing. You had to push the pin out every time, so it was not fun. But yeah, the later ones just don't have a pin, and they have flats on the lay shaft which lock into the corresponding shape in the slipper pads. Probably can't see that, but it's a sort of half slot, half hole. So it's got the flat parts to lock on, lock onto the corresponding flats on that shaft. So the plates will be locked to the shaft, and then the gear and the slipper pads can slip in between. There's a little dust cover for the hex end. I don't usually put them in. I don't think it's needed, but you can. Might keep out a little bit of dust, but it also can potentially stop the axle from going in, like if it binds the axle if the axles are in too far. But usually the RC10s have the opposite problem. The axles pop out at full droop, so you've got to limit the droop a little bit to make sure the pin part of the bone stays in the outdrive. So let's pop that in for fun, so it doesn't feel left out. If I can. There we go. Cool. It's probably the same as the other side anyway. Okay, so got the dust cover in there. Now, don't think I've forgotten anything else. There's the plate will go in there. So with these 3 bolts, I do put a little bit of Loctite on them. And because it's just metal to metal and there's only a few threads. So these motor plates are only 2mm thick. So let's pop a little bit of Loctite into those 3. Did I put in the correct 3? I did, because that's the ones we're using. Only needs a tiny bit. Okay, now let's do the exciting bit, which is to line up the motor plates. Just get all 3 screws in first, just a thread or 2, because we don't want to get it twisted or crooked. And then just bring it in a couple of threads at a time. Again, don't need to over tighten this. Just sort of nipped up. You'll see here well, might be a bit hard to see, but the 3 ends of the threads stick out a millimetre or so. So you can minimize that if you want to. You can put washers on the other side of the 3 heads. But that also is part of the reason why I like to shim the lay shaft outwards so that it gives the extra clearance. So let's just check this, because I've got one of these bolts is sticking out quite a bit. Yeah, so not happy with that. So let's take them out, and I'll put little spaces in there. I think I've cheated again. I've made some little spaces for that, but any sort of, you can use a 3mm shim. Technically they're 440, but any small shim that'll sit under the head. Okay, I'm back. Cool, that's much better. So you can see the tip of the thread just sticks through the plate. Probably only 0.2, 0.3 of a mil maybe. And don't over tighten. Just let the Loctite do its job. So I'll pop those little magical spaces into the other 2. Beautiful. Okay. So yeah, a good tip there is to use the little spacers or shims or whatever you've got, and just make sure that you're only getting those screws protruding just a couple of tenths. Yep, and then be pretty gentle in screwing those up, just so it's tight but nothing more. Cool, let's have a quick look at our manual, because I've been ignoring that. Hopefully I've told you all the tips and processes here. So I've got the casing preparation. Yep, sanding the faces, all that stuff, all good. Yep, so that's the hole you don't drill in the casing that we want to have this short bolt to thread into. And then we've got our 1-inch bolts. Oh, here we go, I've got the tip there. I should have read my own instructions. Add a 1/8 shim under the bolt heads. So yeah, 1/8 shim, or if you've got something similar. So that avoids the tip protruding past the motor plate. There you go. Cool. And now we've built the rest of the diff. And we can install the diff next, pretty much. What else have we got? Top plate. Yep, we'll do that next. Awesome. Going well. So let's do the slipper. I think these two plates are identical. There's no in or out or anything like that. So I can pop them on, and then yeah, double check again that you've got clearance behind the plate. It's now nowhere near those screws, so that's beautiful. And then we've got the gear. I never know which way these go. Is that symmetrical? I know the modern Octalock ones are not symmetrical. This is the one that comes with the Fan RC transmission set, and it looks symmetrical to me. Now we've got the slipper plates. So I think when they're brand new you can just chuck them straight in. A little tip that the suspension whisperer Luisola taught me was to clean these plates usually after they're worn a bit, or after you've used them for a while. They get sort of a grainy surface or a dirty surface, and they're pretty hard to clean. So the hot tip is to use the scalpel blade at quite an acute angle, so not straight onto it like you'd be cutting, so almost opposite that. So you have it at maybe, what's that, 10 degrees or something, 10-15 degrees sort of angle, and then use kind of like a scrape away from the sharp part of the blade. So for me it's like left to right, and you just like scrape over the surface, and you'll see it sort of cleaning all the fluff or sort of grime or whatever off the material. Yeah, so when they're brand new, I don't think you need to do this. It's really only after they're worn. You're trying to clean them up, make sure you get good sort of slip action still. So I'll do this just as a demonstration. You can see a little bit of material coming off, so like the sort of slight I don't know, fibers or fluffiness off the fresh surface. So I guess it can't hurt. So yeah, just make sure you're sort of scraping it away from the sharp side of the blade. So left to right, the way I'm holding it. So you don't actually, obviously you don't want to cut into the surface. You just want to scrape across it. Yep, not much else coming off that. Looks pretty clean. Cool. So yeah, just a technique there. Hot tip. Not from me, that's from Mr. Lou, has that. Kudos. Okay, now here's a tricky bit. What's the best way to do this? Because you need to sort of stop everything falling apart or falling out. So basically, if you leave it almost vertical, so that the slipper plate doesn't sort of fall off the shaft, and then you can, and the slipper pad doesn't fall out of the octagon shape. And then once you've got that first one and the spur in, then you can just hold the spur, of course, and put the other side on, and then you just rotate that outer one until it slides onto the flats as well. Okay, and then we've got this humongous chunky slipper spring, which is much bigger than the original OG Stealth. And then you've got the stepped washer, which you put the step inside the spring so it locates it. Beautiful. Yeah, I think one of the very early prototype, well, not prototype, but early production run fan RC ones, I had the wrong washer in it. So he's fixed that up quick smart. So awesome. So that's a really perfect washer now, so it fits nicely to locate the spring, and the other side of the spring's located on the slipper pad, on the slipper plate, and then this one locates the spring. Inside diameter is perfect for the bolt. And then we've got our lock nut. I think that looks like a metric. I need the metric tool. I've got all my imperial tools. One moment. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, that's a 5.5mm, so it's a normal metric slipper nut on this. So remember that one, because originals had a really weird nut. Well, weird. It was a 540 size, so everything else on the car was a 440 imperial. But the slipper nut on the original RC10s was always 540 on the early ones, which means the actual nut driver was still a 1/4 inch nut driver. Sorry, not 1/4 inch. Yeah, 1/4 inch nut driver for the outside on the originals. But the actual thread was a 540 size thread compared to a 440. So there's a relevant bit of information for you for now. But yeah, this one is all metric, that thread and the nut. So, don't know, probably tighten it till it's flush with the thread, the outside of the nut. What you do want to do is make sure it's on the loose side to start with, and then when you go to test or set the slipper, when you're on the, got the car finished and it's on the ground ready to run, you want the slipper to slip easily first. You definitely don't want to make the diff slip by having an overly tight slipper, because that'll kill your diff pretty quickly. So you want to make sure the diff's nice and tight. That's why we only backed off 1/8 of a turn, and then you'd could even have that a little bit looser. Just make sure you leave the slipper super loose, and when you first try, you'll hear it slip easily, ideally, and then you just gradually work your way up to the good slipper setting. So you want the slipper to slip first and protects the diff. So on the ground, I guess, if it slips for I guess the first meter or so of your car driving forwards from a standing start, that's a good rough ball point, good ball point, good starting point for you. So yeah, there's a very brief basic setting for the slipper. Cool. Okay, so that assembly is all ready. That can go in the car. So I've got some bolts here. I think they look like they've come with the Fan RC Stealth box as well, which is to 4 lots of, what are they, 5/16 probably, or 3/8. 3/8 length. So cool. So yes, that comes with the 440 3/8 bolts to bolt it in. So we'll use those puppies. Cool. So I'll clean up a bit. Get rid of my magical bag of cheating shims. I'm not going to use that last bolt, 1-inch bolt. That's a spare. I'll pop that plate on next. Okay, so let's bring the car back. We'll get rid of this. time to install Gearbox. So again, I just pre-thread all 4 bolts first, and then tighten them up sequentially. Can't even see that. Get that one lined up. Last one. Cool, so all 4 in. So now we can tighten. Try to sort of tighten them up sequentially, like a bit at a time, and go from like diagonal one to the other. And again, this is into the nylon plastic of the diff halves, so definitely do not over tighten these either. Just need to make sure they're nipped up, make sure that there's no gap between the gearbox and the chassis, of course. Good to probably check these after the first run as well. Sometimes they need like an extra 1/8 of a turn once all the plastic kind of compresses and beds in to the thread. But that's pretty good. Whoa, look at that, gearbox is in. So now we've got the top plate. Usually we don't use the rear body post. It's kind of, depends how you mount the bodies. So, you know, the bodies have the big sort of tail section, most of the RC10 style bodies. So you definitely can. It does make it a bit harder, depending on your wing mounting, it can make it a bit harder to get the body off. But if you have the wing wires and the tubes, so not like Masami's car, then it's okay because you can just pull the wing off and then the body comes off. And this rear post is the bit that holds it down with the body pin. But I'm going to put it on regardless because Masami had the piece on his car. This car is probably going to become the Halsey car. I think he still had the body section. I'll have to check that one. But either way, it's kind of cool. It's an iconic RC10 part. Need another one of these fun Phillips bolts. So see this plate is countersunk on the bottom to take the head of the Phillips, so make sure you pop that the right way up, and then we'll see how this goes in. Might just grab the shock pliers again if needed, so I can just put that pinhole crosswise and nip it up. There we go, and that pops on there. So another few of the 3/8. Okay, it's got 8/32 countersunk underside, and then we've got 4 of the 3/8 440 bolts to pop on. Make sure you get, especially these front ones, get the thread started into the bulkhead. careful into the nylon of the gearbox, and need slightly more force into the polycarbonate material of the bulkhead. There we go. So that's a very important brace, so it sort of keeps the whole structure as a box structure and protects the bulkhead from bending and breaking, and obviously keeps all the rear end sort of braced, so it's you sort of motor, all the weight of the motor and the gearbox isn't moving around. Awesome. So there's the gearbox built and installed, but we're missing a special piece. That's an extra item, so I haven't got anything in the instructions because it's basically a standard RC10 replica item. But for the motor plate I do have the cutting guide sort of there, which I showed you before, as a reference if you decide and want to do that. But we have a motor guard. These were like absolutely impossible to find back when almost 4 years ago, or yeah, 4 years ago, when I created this replica kit in the first place, because there was no re-release parts available for this guard. You had to find the originals, which were hen's teeth and very expensive. But since then there are a few replicas you can get, including ours, which is the Gaza Motorsport version that goes with the motor plate. So very nice. Cool. So here we've got some super short, I think these are 1/4 inch countersunk for the chassis, and then on the back we can put some, we'll have to see if they're maybe 1/4 inch button heads. We might need the slightly longer 3/8 versions, but we'll see how we go. Again, I use a little bit of Loctite here because it's metal to metal, and always with these alloy parts it's not an exact science, so sometimes you might need to use a bit of force to sort of bend and manipulate them into the right sort of curve and angles just to make it all line up perfectly. These ones are usually pretty close, and the other thing is you can put little washers, if desired, either a metal washer or a little plastic washer. I think I've often used the plastic washers in between the two metal parts, in between the guard and the motor plate, just to sort of fill the gap slightly and yeah, separate that metal on metal contact. So it just seems a bit nicer, but it's personal preference, and how it all lines up and how you want to do your build. So this is interesting bit, so I need to get all these bolts lined up. So again, the same thing, like you'll probably get all 4 bolts in first, just threaded in and not tightened, so because if you tighten them up it'll make it almost impossible to get the last couple in if you tighten the first 2. So we'll leave that super loose, and then how does this line up? Yep, they're close, so I might need to just bend it down a little bit. Pretty close. Have I got any funky washers to put in there? All white ones. It's very associated, I might do. Don't know if I've got any black ones, but white it is. Let's see if those 2 go in there. Yeah, and then the length of the screw, so these 1/4 inch, do a dry fit. Oh yeah, I think that'll be pretty good. Yep. So yeah, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch button head bolts look good. Let's get a little bit of Loctite on them. see if the washer is needed. So that's the first one, a couple of threads in. And then the trickiest is the last one of the 4, of course. Oops. Oh, might have to get tweezers. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so we'll tighten these 2 up first, so that they're mostly tight, not fully maybe. And then nip up the bottom ones. So be careful with these threads, because the thread's pre-tapped for you, but it's only into 2mm aluminium, so you don't want to have too much brute force there. And just make sure these are nipped up. Same thing. There we go. Beautiful. Alrighty then. There goes my magical washer bag again. Cool. So that's coming along. So that is pretty much the conversion kit build, plus the gearbox internals that we just did, and the option motor plate and motor guard. But we'll come back in the next second half of this long build video and do all the other options that we've got. So we've got the shocks, some of the uprights, and we'll put in the steering bell cranks. Ideally you'd probably put the steering bell cranks in right at the start before you put the top deck especially on, to be able to get to the nuts. So we'll probably pop the top deck off and install those in the next episode, and then we'll crack on with the shocks and a few other bits and pieces, and we'll have not a 100% car, but it'll be pretty close.